I didn't set out to be a lawyer. I was reasonably smart at school and I was good at maths, and I thought I'd like to be an accountant. And for some reason I learnt that you could do a law degree and then convert to accountancy. So that was the path I embarked on. When I did my degree, I enjoyed some of it and I got a bit of a glimpse into the practice of law and decided that actually law was for me. I'm an adopted only child, much wanted, much loved. From parents who had not been to university. I was the first generation to go to university. I don't remember there being particularly strong expectations on me, other than the fact that my father had left school with no qualifications, but got a second chance and qualified as a quantity surveyor ultimately, and that's how he pursued his career. And so I do remember him, I suppose, imbuing a sense of not squandering opportunities. I studied at Edinburgh University because there wasn't a huge amount of money to spare, and it was clear that I could only go to university if I lived at home. My family knew nothing about law firms. I was lucky to have a godfather who was a bank manager, and he knew that there was a book in which there were lists of all law firms that were in Edinburgh. And he photocopied some pages for me and highlighted some firms that he knew, so I applied to them. I went for interview, and unknown to me, they had already filled that post, but they were also looking for somebody to do a commercial role as a commercial newly qualified assistant. So I had a rather strange interview where they told me about a job as a commercial property assistant, and I kind of tested a couple of times to say, so this is doing commercial property law, and without batting an eyelid or making any reference to the terms of the advert, they said yes. But I quite liked them. I knew the firm was a good firm, so I thought, well, they seem to like me, they offered me the job, so I took it. And that was probably my first example of how careers can be formed of entirely random incidents, where you might plan to travel in one direction and you end up going somewhere completely different. So I joined Morton Fraser in 1983 on completion of my traineeship, and I had no idea they thought I was any good. But a couple of years later I was called down to the senior partner's room, and I thought I was going to be fired because I couldn't understand why he would want to see me otherwise. I was offered a partnership and I was astonished. I was 26 years old. I rushed up to an empty partner's room and phoned my mother and said, Mum, I've been offered a partnership. And in great Scottish understated style, she said, is that a good thing, dear? And if I reflect back, it was absolutely the right question, but I certainly thought it was a good thing. And so I became a partner. I practiced in commercial property law for a number of years, but I became very interested in the business of law and what made the firm tick. And so I gradually became more involved in areas of running the firm. And in 1999, I was asked to become their chief executive or managing partner. Perhaps only looking back that I realised that I was very fortunate. I was in a firm that was very forward thinking about having a female partner and more female partners. When it came to talking about maternity leave, it was one of my male unmarried partners who wanted that to be generous because he didn't want a sleep-deprived mother back at work too quickly. So there was that kind of generally supportive atmosphere throughout. I think the thing that saddens me is that that wasn't other people's experience. From the moment I had my first child, which was in 1991, I worked part-time and have never worked full-time since then. Now, part-time in legal professional practice is perhaps a lot of people's full-time work, but relatively speaking, I always had flexibility after that. I know one of my contemporaries in another major Scottish firm said she wouldn't dare mention the part-time phrase because it would be seen as a lack of commitment to the partnership. I always describe myself as a full-time partner working part-time in the office. And I think that commitment and flexibility is really important to making it work. Just after I was made chief executive, my husband was offered a job working abroad for a year. And I can remember bursting into tears at that point because I couldn't imagine. My children were 9 and 6 at that time. I couldn't imagine how that would work, but it was an opportunity which we couldn't say no to for him. And it is remarkable how people rally round you. I was exceptionally tired. I would regularly fall asleep in the car waiting to pick the children up from school. But it was actually a great period in our life, and we wouldn't have missed it for anything. But having great support, my mother very sadly died within 4 months of my elder daughter being born. But my father rose to the challenge in a way that I'm sure he was never involved in my babyhood or childhood. And he was a great support. We had wonderful part-time nanny who also was very flexible, and other friends who really gave a lot of support. Having that network of support, I think, is really important to make it work. But I remember being in the middle of a particularly large commercial property transaction and needing to get home because I was the only person around to pick up the children from school, and a client needing to have a conversation. And I explained to him that I had this issue. And he immediately said, why would you worry about that? Either let's have that conversation now, let's have that conversation later if it's convenient to you, or it can wait until tomorrow. And so we make assumptions about clients, and I think it's about building relationships with your clients and helping them understand that you will be there when you need them to be there. But also being willing to ask, what would suit them and explaining what would suit you. My initial work was very much internal, but I gradually began to look outside the firm, speaking to clients, looking at what our markets were, and that took me to be involved with the Confederation of British Industry, the CBI. I knew by then how important it was that the voice of business was heard by government. And so I was very keen to play a part in that in Scotland. It meant that I was meeting with a huge variety of businesses, which was really valuable to my firm because I was hearing what was going on in their businesses, hearing what was going on in the economy, and it was really useful intelligence to take back to my business. About the same time, I was thinking of transitioning from being chief executive, and I became the non-executive chair of my law firm. And that led me into a portfolio non-executive career. So I'm someone who has had a career as a lawyer, but that has then metamorphosed into something else. And I think that's the other thing I like to talk to young women about, that the law is a fantastic discipline and I really encourage young women to go into it. But it's also not a life sentence. It does lead on to other interesting things. And I found that next stage of my career fascinating. So I've shared through various means, whether it's through the Law Society or I ran a businesswomen's network, or whether it is just spending time with young women, and I do a lot of mentoring of young women. A lot of people in senior positions make it look effortless, or it may appear to others that it's effortless. And I think it's about sharing the fact that it's all very hard work, and that there are ways in which you can make things easier, and sharing that experience and not making it too intimidating to aim to be as fulfilled in your career as you can be.